Hey everybody, Technic Lego 1988. If you were a kid, then wow, you wanted this kit so bad, the test car. Amazing, and I just spent a lot of money to get a pretty good version of this in real life, and we're gonna put it in the simulator. The sound you just heard, you know, the amazing engine sounds, I've actually recorded from the 4-cylinder sound that's in this car. And we're gonna try and recreate this thing in Automobilista as realistically as we can, with all the suspension geometry, all the properties as much as we can, which will be an interesting thing. How does the Technic Lego test car from 1988 actually drive? Well, we're gonna find out. A couple videos. First, a pretty long one, putting all the specs and all the measurements into spreadsheets. I'll have a quick video with some of the measurements I did, I think, or I squeeze it in somewhere. And then, of course, the video where we will actually drive it and crash a lot. So, today's video, putting all the numbers in the spreadsheet, falling asleep. Well, no, that's what you're gonna do. I didn't do that. I actually succeeded. If you like that sort of thing, well, you might like this video. Enjoy. Hey everybody. What's new? Lots of new stuff. But look at this beauty. If you were a kid in the 80s, 1988 came along like out of the blue, this was on your wish list. You lusted after this. Technic Lego 8865 test car with a mega feature. I'm relying on the autofocus, let's hope it works. A bit of a nostalgia trip. I thought, let's get this for way too much money, put it together, display, put it up for display in my office. And then I thought, simulator. Right, so let's put this car in the spreadsheet in Automobilista, and hopefully we'll get the 3D model as well, and we can actually take it for a drive. And you can just make a car, but we're gonna try and recreate this realistically. So we look at the suspension geometry, the steering geometry, the weight distribution, differential, gearing, all sorts of stuff I've measured because, well, this is the easiest car to make your measurements, so it's real data. And then we can drive the thing, scaled up of course. We're gonna do an 8:1 scale, makes it a bit of a Stratos type car but then wider. Will be interesting. How does it drive? How does it feel? And how can you explain the feel of the car based on the limitations of Technic Lego? So let's see how that goes. And today we're gonna put it in a spreadsheet. And hopefully the 3D model arrives. Ugly face, go away, yes. Oh, see? That's much better. To help me along, we have a bit of wine. So this is the faithful recreation, just like I did in the 80s. Always a glass of wine with my teenage Lego building. I've made a list of all the stuff I've measured. It's going to be fairly long videos for the hardcore. The driving video will be more interesting for some, I think. Yep. So first, a matter of scale. That's interesting, right? So we're going to do an 8:1 scale. And I made some measurements here with my scale that does grams. 1160 gram, it's 1.16 kilos. The factor is 512 because dimensions are 8 times bigger. Area is 8 times 8 bigger, but mass is 8 times 8 times 8 bigger, which is 512 times. So all the weights I measure will be multiplied by 512. All the dimensions that I measure, or something like this, times 8. And area doesn't really come into play, but if we have area, it's times 64. So that's an interesting way to do this. And measuring, there will be some bits I'll edit in. Is interesting, easy with a weighing scale. So here we have some weights, and I also measured some distances. And look here, this is the accurate drawing of the car on its side like that. So what you do is you put it on an angle, and then when it almost tips over, then the center of gravity is in line with the tipping point. So by tilting it until it almost tips over, you can find the height of the center of gravity. That's a luxury value, because often you don't get that with real data. So I've done all that and found the gear ratios, something with the suspension rate. So let's get right into this then. It's raining outside. That's typical near holiday season stuff. Spreadsheet in front of us here. Let's start to fill this out. So the car dimensions, total length 4.67. No, sorry, wrong column. Expert here. Width, it's very wide. And high, how high is it? Total height. Pretty high too. Inertia box, we'll do that later. Wheelbase scaled up times 8. Track really wide. Sort of a strange proportional thing, this Lego from that era. And this is where the uprights and stuff and the brake discs, which it doesn't have brakes. How we'll do that? It's a little inward, these masses. It's not too important. Center of gravity height, that's interesting. So let's first go here and enter a couple of things, because I've measured the ride heights as well. I think that will be another short video where I'll summarize all that. So the ride heights, 0.192 for the front and 0.2 at the rear. Is slightly raked. Okay, now go back. Default, oh yes, suspension, where are you? Default setup. What I'm doing now is I'm adjusting the sort of the stock ride heights, which goes into this center of gravity calculation thing here. And I'll need to do that. First of all, center of gravity height, measured this, scaled up. So here's that drawing, how to measure that. So this is the car on its side. I measured the angle with my geodriehoek, which is a very special Dutch tool to measure angles. And then when a vertical line crosses the line vertical to the car, in the center line of the car, this is the height, but this was the suspension was extended, right? So this was probably the highest ride height, 73 millimeters. And then I did some numbers with the nominal ride height and then scaled those up. And that gives us a center of gravity height of 0.55 meters, which is pretty high. It's like more than half a meter. It's probably, for most modern cars, to have the engine a bit low. Racing cars like GT cars, probably 40 centimeters, 35, 40 centimeters. Plenty of road cars with the engine on top of the drivetrain might be in this neighborhood, but it's on the high side, which will be interesting for the handling. But hey, it's real data, it's got to go in. So 0.55. However, what we enter here for the center of gravity height is above the reference plane. And now we are at 0.463. Let's enter a couple more things first. That's probably a better idea. Let's do this roughly. So now I'm at 0.54, but things might change a little bit. That's fine. Weights. Interestingly, weights, like I said, is times the scale, times the scale, times the scale. So 512 times the 1.16 kilos, the total weight, 593.9. The spinning weights, interesting, the tire is quite heavy on these cars, so it's relatively a large number. It's 29.7. And the static bits, like the not rotating parts, uprights and that sort of stuff, is I have to add something up still. 0.8 plus 3 is 3.8. That's very light. And at the rear we have 3.3 plus 10.2, 13.5. And the weight distribution is 54.5%. It's not adjustable, it's factual, it's real data, we're gonna keep it like that. Fuel, well, it doesn't have fuel, does it? We'll just, we need fuel, otherwise we won't go. So let's give it a, let's give it a 40 liter tank. All right. What else? Something with dimensions. Let's go to the tires. And the tire size is actually fairly normal. Radius 0.328. And the width of the tire is about 0.19. So that's not too bad. However, what is the rim? All right, that's about 43 millimeters times 8. That's the millimeters. Okay, well, that's meters, and then 13.5 inches. All right. So rim 13.5. That's the width of the tire. Radius was, where is my document? I like to keep that on my second screen. There we are. Radius 0.328. That's enough for now, so we go back here. Right, so now the weights are in, the ride heights are in, dimensions are in, and now we have to go for, at these ride heights, a center of gravity height of 0.55. So I'm too low, and that means raising it up. .55. Ooh, we're almost there. There we are. So center of gravity height, that value. Excellent. Fuel level. Oh yes, what's the fuel level? 10. See, that raises the center of gravity because the fuel is a bit lower. So that means we need to lower that a little bit. There we are again. So with 10 liters of fuel, all the numbers, we have the correct height there. Isn't this entertaining? Yes. Some other things. Under tray. That's of some importance. So these are the red dots where the car bottoms. And there are these points. It's going to be a bit small, but let's do the magic. Wee. So on the bottom, this sort of sticks out a bit low. So that is a point we have to add where we might bottom out. And then at the actual axle, sort of, the ride heights are higher. So the lowest point is around, well, a little back from the front wheel all the way to pretty much the rear wheel. That's where it's low, and then at the front it's a bit higher. So yeah, let's see where that ends up. So we'll measure the ride height at the axles. That's fine-ish, which we are doing now. Yeah, that's cool. Then all the way up at the front, this bumper sits a little higher. So that's about 1 centimeter, so it's about 8 centimeters higher. And it's not quite that wide. Yeah. let's see. Undertray, yes, I'm sorry. -2, okay. 0.6 is about there. It's about there-ish. And it was a little higher. And now, interestingly, the other ones, sort of in the middle, we might bottom out because these springs that are on this car might not be very stiff. So this bottoming out points thing might actually become somewhat important. Let's make myself small again. Sorry to having made you endure that. So we're just filling in the red points here. I see I've been obstructing the view with my face. These are the under tray points where we'll bottom out. So we have at the axles we have a point, and then we'll add a point here in the front that's a bit higher, and here it's the lowest point. So we'll have to make sure we do that. It's a bit more to the center. I think that is reasonable, and something like that perhaps. 10, well, what is it? We'll have to make sure. Yeah, roughly. All right, let's not be. So, and it's more close to the center, somewhere like that, and somewhere like that. I think that's fair. So we have the under tray points here. Spring, I don't know. That's probably fine. So inertia, that's a nice one. The inertia box, well, it's surprising how much stuff is either in the front or in the back, and in the middle it's not as dense. So I think it will have quite a bit of inertia, so let's not underestimate it. Currently the inertia box is 3.7 by 1.5. I think it's probably fair-ish. The inertia box are these striped lines. And you can actually see on the model that the wheels extend out the side. So the inertia box is probably going to stay inside the wheels like that, but it's going to be quite long because the masses are not centered but to the outside. So that's probably fine. So that gives us these inertias probably fine. It's fairly lightweight at 600 kilos. So that's cool. Engine, we don't really know. We'll see about that later. I'll install something that works. Gear ratios, though, we do know that we have 3 forward gears. And we have the ratios too. So with Technic Lego, you know all the gearing. You can find the teeth or count them if you have too much time. So the first gear is a ratio of 2 and 1.5 and then 0.67. Yeah. So 2, 1.5, 67. We don't have that. Really? You see, you get that thing when you do realistic modeling of this, you get some funky gear ratios, and we definitely get some funky gear ratios. Final drive is 2. And RPM for shifting, well, we're gonna not do a lot of RPM. Okay, so at around 2000 RPM, I think we'll do that. I did 1600 RPM with my sound recordings. We have a first gear, takes us to 60, second gear to 80, and third gear to 180-ish. That's some weird ass gear spacing, jeez. Gonna double check that later, but I feel it's probably correct. Okay, terrible gears then, nice. Diff, clutch, brakes, well, let's not, 1, then I'm just turning off the brake heating. We don't even know if we don't technically have brakes, but I think I'll install some just to make it more drivable. Although it's not realistic, is it? Well, if we don't model all the things it doesn't have, I don't think we'll be having much luck. So we will install some brakes. They're just not temperature sensitive. And let's tune them a little bit. So these are sort of knobbly tires. It's a bit of an off-roady thing. It won't be super grippy. So let's see if we can tune these brakes to do about 1G. For that we have to change the torque, car setup strength, default, that's fine, 60% front. Let's make it 65, it's short wheelbase, lots of weight transfer. So default brake bias 65%, adjustable, why the heck not? And let's reduce the strength. So now the brakes are able to do 1.2G. Now they do 1G, and I think optimistically the car will pull 1G with knobbly tires and not so many aerodynamic forces and everything. So yeah, ish. So brake set 1.1G, clutch torque, clutch inertia, that's probably fine. Preload, yeah, this is an open diff, which is actually quite nice. There we are. You can probably just about see it in there. So they spin opposite directions now. It's an open diff, but there is always a little bit of friction in there. So it's mainly open, but I think we'll just have a little bit of preload. Don't break it. A little bit of preload in the diff to have a little bit of, ever so slight bit of locking, but otherwise nothing. So 25 perhaps. No pump. Power min, well, it's 0%. No locking. So I think that sorts our clutch, diff, brakes. Now gears, right? So, sorry, engine. What do we do? Inertia. Stall. Idle 12, yeah, nah. Gonna be very low revs because of the engine. I didn't manage to do a lot more than 1600 RPM. So we're gonna idle. This is very confusing, these numbers. This is not the latest stuff I have to make engines, but for this exercise it's fine. So it's gonna idle at 350, maximum torque, 1250, maximum power. 1900, upper limit 2500, something like that. Oh, look at that, that's amazing. This is some sort of strange reference curve that we don't need. Ref limit 2200. All right, now let's change this scale because we're not doing the revs. 2500 and maximum torque, maximum power. Well, we can do anything we like here, can't we? Given the weight, 600 kilos, and the lack of advanced physics, I think we will be in trouble with anything far over 200 horsepower. So we'll make it 300 horsepower. That's excellent. Torque. Ooh, that's gonna make, at these low revs, gonna be very torquey. Although that doesn't really matter. At low revs, torque sounds like a great idea, but you don't really use it all that much. 1200 Newton meters, geez, okay. Where are we? So peak torque is at 1250. So I'm just making a curve. Yeah. Let's make it a bit more. So now we have a nice curve with our peak power happening somewhere at 1900, peak torque at 1250. Yeah, that's not too bad. Just let's see. Idle. I want the revs to go down a bit more. How about something like that? Works well at low revs. We might need that. Turbo boost. We have turbo? Nah. Has no turbo. Excellent. Right, this is our engine, reasonably decent. And our engine braking. I think we need a bit more. Something like that is probably fine. We've got the throttle maps here, these part throttle curves, they look fine. Rev limit, yeah, I think that's fine. Efficiency, we don't really care about that. We have 100% efficiency, so we actually have 300 horsepower there. Yes. Fuel, everything, we don't care about that really, do we? So we've had this, we've had the engine, we have the weirdest gearbox in history. I'll double check that is it that dumb? I don't understand. Probably is. In fact, let me try to find the data. I did the numbers myself, but I also know we have the internet. So the lip 1.33 is for third gear. Second gear, yeah, it's a huge difference. 4 to 1 for first gear, 3 to 1 for second gear, and 1.3, okay. It'd be like that, so it's effectively a 2-gear car, 80 kilometers and then 108, all right. It is what it is, and that will be interesting. Yeah, tires now. Sort of knobbly, high profile, not too grippy. Let's just enter some numbers here that are a bit like that. It always helps to have a little bit of a sip. Right, radius, we've had that. So this is the expansion. These knobbly tires, they probably expand. We have a base spring. Oh, what sort of target spring rate do I need? It's probably fine. Pressure, I'm gonna run at about, it's fairly low weight car. 2 bars will be fine. And then we have a spring rate of 210 here. That's a little low. So I'm just adding the spring that gets added, the spring rate that gets added to the tire from pumping it up. 240, that's probably, yeah, this is fine. 230,000 newtons per meter, that's good. Damping, I don't know, that will be interesting. The suspension has no damping, how are we gonna do that? Speed sensitive, yeah, probably. You can see the grip drop a bit with speed as these weird tires balloon and do weird things. So at top speed we'll lose a little bit. Pneumatic trails, probably fine. We will be in trouble anyway. Build up, sure. Let's see, 24, 90. So this is our slip curve. Can change the shape. yeah, 0.5, who cares? The scale for, we need these to be forgiving tires. So there is a little bit of drop off, but not too much. Nice and drifty, knobbly tires. I think that'll be just fine. 0.5, yes. Right, grip. Do we say pressure first? What are sort of the tire loads we will be experiencing? Well, it's a lightweight car, so I think, you know, at most half the weight is gonna lean on one tire. At most, right? So that's is that fair? Let's go a bit lower. So at these loads, we will have our slip curves and all that. And static loads are like, well, a little over a quarter of 600 kilo. So yeah, it's gonna be less. So yeah, this is probably hard cornering. Does it matter? No. Why am I doing this then? I don't know. Without formatting. There, just drag it, drag it. That's a little better. Pressure-wise, base pressure, 160. Pressure. Let's shoot for 2 bars of pressure, and then let's plot the lines where we are a little bit beyond, so plus and minus 25. Here are some curves. Let's bring that a bit closer. Right, so now we are getting some curves. I'll explain what those are just a little bit. So these are the grip multipliers at various pressures. So at 175, 200 minus 25, we have a lot of grip at low loads and it drops off at high loads. And if we are at 2 bar pressure, we have this blue curve. So we have a wider range where the tire has the most grip. And if we pump it up to 2.25, we get more grip, but only at really high loads. So this optimum is around 2 bar-ish. Is this important? Well, we might actually change the tire pressures. These are solid tires, so that's not realistic. I thought we were gonna make this realistic. Yeah, apparently not. Something like that is not too bad. Let's just equal these numbers. And is that all correct? Well, let's see. 2 bar. Pressure. It's a bit much. That's a little nicer. Yes. Let's not make the effect too big. All right, 80 degrees Celsius. That's optimum temperature. Above temperature, below temperature. Well, let's not do heat. That's gonna be. Oh, sorry. No, yeah. Yeah, that's more like it. And laterally, let's see where we are. We need a bit more. Highest load, well, let's say 6,000 like that. Something like That is not too bad. Auto scale, there we are. So we started a friction coefficient about 1.15-ish. And it goes down, but not too much. So basically here we're setting the load sensitivity, so the dropping of the grip with increasing tire load, which is a sort of factual thing, but how much is always the case. So these are sort of roadish tires where a drop of 0.03, 0.04 mu per kilonewton is sort of fair-ish for a tire that has this size, so realistic-ish. So peak slip, well, they're very knobbly, large angle. Let's make it between 8 and 10 degrees. And at 10 degrees, so how much elasticity the peak slip angle has. Where do we put that? Not too high load, something like that. Now you can see this line move. So if we change this to 15, you see the peak slip moves as the tire load. Here, 2900. Here's the peak, and at low load, it's here. So how flexible is that? We don't really know. This doesn't look very flexible. We want to make it more flexible. Knobbly tire. Pretty nice like that, yeah. 8 and 12, like that. Peak camber. 6 degrees, that's fine. Gain, who knows. See if we plot some camber here. -3. Oh, sorry, 3, it's positive here. Camber gives us a little bit of initial force. It's pretty nice like that. That seems like a reasonable value. Only thing is, there is no camber on this camber gain on this thing. It squeaks. Doesn't like it. Wheel moves vertical. That's going to be interesting too when we drive it. So there will be camber, positive camber, because as we roll into the corner, the tires will lean outward and we'll have positive camber, which is a negative thing, even though it's called positive. Right, so that's not too bad. For lateral, longitudinal, do we know? Nah, we don't. We have no clue, in fact. That's how it tends to be. The friction is probably a little lower. Same that. Same that. That's probably fine. This automatically, the peak slip for longitudinal slip gets calculated in order to improve the combined slip. They need to be a certain value, proportional to the lateral slip. Otherwise the combined slip curves look a little weird, but they can look really good. And doing it this way makes the tire model really nice actually. So 0, same, just checking front and rear is the same here. Peak 5,000, just like the front. Camber loss, so much, and yeah, same. 1.5. Pneumatic trail grip fract power. That's a long term. We added that with AMS. Makes the force feedback get lighter more and more as you get more steering lock on. This was a pretty bad thing in RF1 and originally in game Supercar, but we added a parameter to it that makes it way more believable. But I'm going to be a little forgiving on this number because we have some suspension issues and the force feedback will be terrible already. So by going to the upper limit of what this value might realistically be, we might have some steering feel, who knows. Just double checking, I think this is the tires pretty much done. All the same, looks pretty good. So let's just quickly summarize. We have all the weights and the inertias, and that stuff is center of gravity height. We have an engine that 300 horsepower will get us into trouble, no problem. We've got some gear ratios. We might, well, we'll see. 180, 190 is probably fairly quick. Let's see where we drive this thing. We added an open diff with just a little bit of friction. Brakes that do about 1 point something G. We have tires now. Tires name Lego. That's right. Let's see, do we need heating? No, let's turn heat off for the first tests. So all those parameters are sort of turned off now. Aero. Well, we'll keep this really simple and just put in some numbers. It's not, the most aerodynamic shape, so we'll give it a bit of lift and quite a bit of drag, and then we'll sort of be done with it. Not adjustable. So there's one setting. Yeah. Where is the body? 0.437. I'm just gonna put the height of the body at the same value as the center of gravity, so the drag that bumps into the car doesn't cause any moments. We will have plenty of moments when we drive this. Front wing, well, we'll put some numbers in there. All right. We have a bit of front lift, a bit of rear lift. Sorry for it being confused. Something in these charts is turned off or it doesn't find it, and every time I change a number it'll be confused. Diffuser, nah, we don't have a diffuser. Yes, I think if we look at the diffuser, yeah, still, let's see, rake. 0. Absolute. All right, so diffuser is turned off, which is probably fair. Wings, a little bit of lift. No adjustability. No drag there, so we just need lift height. We could use a little lift height, so if the front of the car raises, we get a bit more lift. I think that's fair. The standard height is 0.1 plus the ride height, 0.2-ish, so it's 0.3. We want to plot, well, we're going to be pretty high. So between 5 centimeters and 25 centimeters. Ish. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's a bit much. Like that. Maximum height 0.5. All right. Anything weird here? Well, this is very low drag. I think will be 0.6. Something like that. So we have a lot of drag. Let's plot the drag. Just like this video is turning into a drag. So we've put in some drag values. That means at least the drag of the car grows here at low ride heights, rear and front at 5 centimeters. This is our drag at this speed, 180. That's about the top speed, we think, if we don't die sooner. And then the higher the car rides, the more drag it has. So that's something. So we have a little bit of lift on the front. And where are our ride heights? Well, we are sort of here typically. Let's make those bold red. 200, 200. These are sort of the starting ride heights. So a little bit of lift and a bit more lift in the front and a bit less lift at the rear. It's fairly low. In fact, I think we need more lift because it's not looking good aerodynamically. Like that. All right. Aero loss, we have no loss really. It's just bad. Side body. Well, side aero. Well, it's open, isn't it? So it's not too much. So yeah. We have 0.2 lift, that's fine, and then we can turn this off and this off. Perhaps add a little bit of that. You don't feel that. I'm just entering numbers that don't really matter. I think we're kind of good. So we have a car now with lift, about 25 kilos at the front axle, 10 kilos at the rear axle at 180 kilometers an hour. So a total lift of 36 kilos and some drag. Yeah, I think that'll do. We have no sideways strange behavior because, well, there's no downforce to drop off, no diffuser to lose aero, so that's fairly standard. Cool. Then we can go to the suspension and let's make some geometry first. And I think I made a little remark somewhere or not. Yes. So let me just bring that into focus. Oh, I tried to drink my microphone. That's a bad idea. Interesting stuff. Suspension geometry. It has double wishbones. So you see that moving a little. That's pretty cool. At the back as well, we see a couple of things happening. The wishbones are parallel and also of equal length. And that means there is no camber gain. So if we move the suspension, it moves vertically. It swivels across an arc, but it moves vertically. Same at the back, which is a little harder to press without knocking things over or breaking things. So let's try. See, it moves vertically. The rear also has a bit more friction, so that's interesting. We do have, however, steering geometry. Can we see that? Ooh, did I break it? Nah, not yet. You see the inside wheel there is turning more than the outside wheel. That's great, so we have some Ackermann steering to model. And that's going to be interesting. Yeah, I'm saying interesting too often. But it is interesting. As we have evidence of that by nobody watching anymore at this rate, at this point in the video. Anyway, 2 springs each side. But if you look at it at the side here, well, there's a tire in the way, but not only is it sort of here like parallel wishbones, equal length wishbones, in the top view, let's do the bottom view instead, that's better. Oh, yeah. It's also very straight and there is no caster, no kingpin inclination. There's a bit of scrub radius. It's a pretty weird geometry and not ideal. So what I've done is, with the wishbones horizontal, like that, I've measured the ride height, so I can draw my suspension in my spreadsheet with like level horizontal beams, and then give it a certain ride height, and then it will all be perfect, basically. In short, perfection. All right. Right, carrying on then with this suspension thing. here we have a very simple representation of suspension, and I've found out that the horizontal ride heights are 96 millimeters, 0.096. So if I model my suspension, wobbly, for a ride height of this, then we can draw straight beams, and then in game it will actually be at a different ride height, almost double this. So it will only have one choice of angling those wishbones a bit down again. So this one is a bit, so we draw it like that, and then in reality it's lower and it will angle the wishbone. So we can draw it straight, which is easy. I can draw straight lines, perhaps. I also make a little notice of the length of the wishbones. 44 at the front. 0.88. So tire center, 0.226. That's where it calculates it. I'm just going to enter some numbers here. What's the length? So the spindle, there is a little bit of scrub radius. Let me just measure that. I think it's half a tire. So just the nice thing about this being so straight is that it's easy to measure, and it will be a little hard to see, but can you make out the little sort of ball joints in there? They seem to be, that's the point where it steers, where it pivots, to be in line with the edge of the tire. So the scrub radius will be half the tire width, and the tire width is something, 24. So we have, with a scale that's 0.192, that's the tire width, so half that is our scrub radius. That means that the lower spindle and the upper spindle, I have to angle them ever so slightly, otherwise I get a bug. So now editing these numbers, 0.88 is where the tire is, and then the offset is 0.096. So the lower spindle is the tire minus that. And then in order to not break the game, I need an ever so slight little bit of what is it, kingpin angle, otherwise my software breaks, because I'm advanced in spreadsheets, as we all know. Oh dear. And then we know the length as well, which at the front is 44 millimeters, which means scaling it up is 352. So back to my list here. So the front wishbone length is 44 millimeters, scaled up is 0.352. So we can subtract that again from the spindle minus what did I say? There we are. Is that, and is that. Steering is offset a little bit. You can actually OBS expert. So I'm gonna drop this at some point during this video. So here the steering is inward, right? So here is the pivot point of the suspension, and then more towards the center of the car, here, there, is the tie rod. That creates the Ackerman steering, where the inside tire steers a bit sharper. And it's also offset on here. So this is the pivot point of the suspension, where the spring mounts. And then a little bit more to the center, we get that point there. So it's the same length, just offset. Ooh, how much? let me just measure that real quick. I think it's about 5 mil, so times 8, 5 times 8, so about 40 millimeters. That little? It's a bit more, isn't it? Yeah, it's probably more like 7 or 8 mil, so 8 times 8, 64 mil. So let's offset the steering inward. Like that. And the steering on the spindle becomes that. Is that correct? Yes. The only thing is we're doing this now for the longitudinal, the lateral axis. We also have vertical and we need them to be parallel. So let's put the lower spin. It doesn't really matter where these are actually. We don't have to measure that. But let's see the lower spindle. Like that. Upper spindle somewhere there. Lower chassis is 0.1. See, now we get these parallel arms. That's pretty cool. Side view, we still have that issue of the ball joints there being in the center of the tire. So in a side view, the tire center line and the extension of those ball joints, they are in the same line. So there is no setback, no caster angle. So we have to zero these. I know I'm doing an excellent job here. Sarcasm. Spindle 0. So here in the side view there is no caster anymore. In the front view there is pretty much no kingpin inclination. I need a little bit. We have these parallel things, so that's starting to look like it. And now just graphically making it a little nicer, making it a wishbone like that. The steering is actually behind, so we need something like that. That's not too bad. How far is it behind though? Can we say anything about that? It's about 24 millimeters. So it's more like that, and the steering spindle. Right, that's close. Oh, vertically, we're not done yet. It's sort of in the middle. Vertical steering, spindle, steering. Excellent. So, I think this is our front suspension. We have wishbones here, parallel, front view, equal length, parallel at this ride height. In practice, they will be dangling down a little bit. Steering offset to the center of the car, so we get Ackerman. We have scrub radius here. We have no caster, no trail. It'll be terrible. All right, excellent. And the rear is sort of the same, but the length is different. So let's make this 0.3, and that's the same. Upper spindle. Yes, upper spindle is the position plus. What was that? 256. Oh, it's a bit like that. Vertically, let's do the same. 0.35, 0.35. Steering chassis, vertically the same. 2.5, upper spindle 35, lower spindle 0.1. Steering spindle same as, yes, like there. Steering spindle, same, so that's a bit like that. Yes, no, this is just to make it look a bit nicer. I think that's about it. This is just visually, you can see there is the springs are inward and the angly bits here are sort of a little bit far removed from the tire. I think that's a suspension that will be terrible. Summarizing the suspension, and it's odd. So with everything being parallel like this, the steering feel will be terrible because we have no no scrub radius. Well, we do have scrub radius. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit drunk. Nah, not drunk. All we have is scrub radius. We have no caster, no trail. So when we start to steer, all we will feel is basically the tire self-aligning torque, and that value will drop off quite quickly. So here we'll feel something, and then the more lock we apply and the more understeer we have, the wheel will have almost no centering in it. So it will be a lot of manual labor to try and do that. We have no, when the car rolls, we have no camber gain. Let's make myself big again because I like pretending to be large. So when we take a corner and the car rolls, the tires, they don't point inwards, they stay parallel to the car. So if the car rolls a certain amount, the tire will also have positive camber through that turn, and it will have terrible grip. And also longitudinally, we have no anti-squat, no anti-dive, no anti-lift. It's very, very simple. And another thing we have is a lack of anti-roll bars. So with the geometry now done, I think one of the few things remaining, creating some sort of a suspension where we set the springs and the dampers and stuff like that. Now, this is a little tricky to do, but I tried to measure suspension rate. So I found that putting about 800 grams of force on the axle sort of bottomed it out. But I didn't measure the actual springs. That would have been better. So adding around 800 grams on each end would bottom out the travel. And well, we have the tire loads, the ground loads, which we've measured, the weight of the vehicle really. Part of that is unsprung, the tire and the upright. So that leaves a certain amount of sprung weight. And we have some guessed initial deflection. We don't really know. Is that? Yeah, probably. I'm doing some numbers here that I've sort of a bit confused by now, but trying to work back to spring rates. And this video is long enough, so I won't go into all the detail, but eventually a force that bottoms out 800 grams is of course times 512 because we're resisting the weight, and the weight has gone up 8 times, 8 times, 8 times. So in the end, we get a force of the spring at full compression, and we have to guess the preload a little bit. And interestingly, we get some rates, 14,000 and 16,000 for the springs, which is soft, buggy-ish, but not, well, it will be quite soft probably, really soft, but not impossible. We might be able to drive this. So back to the suspension. So we've entered the ride heights. Travel, how much travel do we get? The total travel is 0.192. Let's see, let's do this properly. This minus that. So we have a little bit of rebound travel. Oh no, I'm doing it wrong. before. Let's see, Control X. And then we have, so we have travel, and it's just dragging this. So I'll bring it into view here. Kind of similar. So the rear suspension has a little bit of rebound travel and the same bump travel on each end. So what I've done here is, with the numbers, the travels I measured, I'm just measuring from the rest ride height to the minimum ride height, and from the rest ride height to the maximum ride height. And those are the travels from our sort of resting ride height, our average sort of starting point ride heights. We have a little bit movement up and a little bit more movement up, and a little bit of movement down. So those are those numbers. We don't have helper springs, we just have regular springs, and I just mentioned those numbers. So these are, where are down. Let's save. Haven't done that. Jeez, not saved for an hour. That's insane. 14449, and those are our spring rates. And if this is correct, yeah, that's actually fairly nice. We get 1.9 hertz suspension. That's not even super soft. That's decent actually, very nice. However, problems will arise from not having anti-roll bars. There's simply no anti-roll bars on this thing. And when we take a look at our weird ass suspension, another issue we have is that the roll center, my calculations mess up, but because everything is parallel and I don't understand that, our roll centers will also be at the ground. And remember, roll centers are sort of a bit like an anti-roll bar. So we have no anti-roll bar effect from having a high roll center. We have no anti-roll bars, and we have a pretty high center of gravity, and we don't have stiff springs. So my guess is that if we approach like a 1G flat out turn, we'll be on the bump stops on the outside, and this side is going to be up as high as it can go. So we have a lot of body roll, probably like a deux chevaux, something like that. So that won't corner very well, and at that point our tires will be at 5 degrees positive camber, losing grip, and I'm afraid it won't be that great. Bump rubbers, yeah, we need those, of course. Bump rubbers, because we will probably exceed the travel, so yeah. Damping, it has no damping, but it has a lot of friction. The front is very smooth, it sort of wobbles nicely. The rear is very frictiony, because those components, the springs, are placed so far inwards, you get all sorts of bending moments here in the plastic. It's not great, so there's quite a bit of friction at the back. So what I'm gonna do is, even though there are no dampers, I will put in some values. So here in my spreadsheet I can adjust the dampers based on a percentage of critical damping. I can enter damping rates, or I can draw a curve with points, and you get a curve here with the damping force. So using the rates that we actually have, so I supply it with our actual rates. And then let's, for the front, well, it's fairly undamped. 25% of critical damping. And the rear is a little better. 20. 40. Subjective, so there's double the damping at the rear than there is at the front. We have, well, oh, it's all the same. We have settings, but they don't actually change anything. So we can click, but it's not gonna do anything. So that's cool. Anti-roll, not adjustable camber. Well, not adjustable. Toe in, it's not adjustable. Toe at the back, it's not adjustable. Nope. Yep. Caster, nope. None of that. Tires, 2 bars. I think we said that would be a fair pressure to start with. Adjustability a little bit. Steering. I'm gonna measure that angle. Yeah. It's not huge. It's not super drift steering lock, but it's pretty quick rack. So I think it's 25 degrees. And it's got around 360 degrees of steering rotation. So that's that. Spin inertias, that's fine. Doesn't really matter too much. We have a drive axle at the back. Let's do something like that. And it's rubber. It's actually the weight of the tire. It's massive rubber. It's more towards the outside. So we're gonna do that. Like that. I think that means we are pretty close to being done. This was sort of the boring part where we don't yet know how terrible it will be, but in the next video, when we save these files and actually have a go, it will become apparent that we will be in trouble. So let's just go over it real quick. We entered all the weights, which we measured. Center of gravity height, standard ride heights, weight balance, inertias, quite large yaw inertia, which might help us catch the car when it goes sideways, which I'm pretty sure it will do. Heavy tires, light car, all the masses here, yes. We have a 300 horsepower engine with some mapping, that's fine. We have the worst gearbox in the world. Yes, that's definitely a thing. We have brakes. Shouldn't have it, doesn't have it, but I think we'll need them. Open diff, some reasonable sort of reasonable tires, but knobbly ones, not too good. Turned off heating and stuff. We have very simple aero, a bit of lift because it's not very aerodynamic. We have the race of the suspension with some damping, with the travel. The anti-roll camber and so on, everything is set in stone, in plastic, in Lego. Odd, weird ass geometry. I think that's it. So I realize this is sort of in depth, but I hope that I showed you a couple of things with this weird car and some of the effects that it will have and the stuff that we can model here. And we'll be looking forward to seeing how this will drive. If our childhood dreams will be shattered. It will be fun and interesting. Thanks so far, guys, and the next video will be more hands-on, flying through the air into the trees as usual. All right, bye-bye.